Hello?
Hi.
Sagi, can you hear me? Hi.
Yes.
Okay, I think we're on live. I think we are on the show, so to speak. And hello to everybody. Hello to everybody who's joining us today. It's a very special day because it's World Design Day. It's the 50th anniversary of the International Design Council. And also today we are launching a new platform, which, as you can see on the bottom right, it's called VOR OnLive. It's a platform launched by CENTRO on creative content in Facebook OnLive, in podcasts, in all sorts of other digital formats. And if you want to know more about it, please go to our website and check out all the things that are coming up. We have a whole agenda. And for today we have this talk, which is a very special talk for me because I'm here with Sagi Haviv from New York. And Sagi is a partner and designer of the firm Geismar Haviv. And he and his partners are behind some of the world's most famous logos. I hope we can see a slide. Yes, here are some of the logos. You can see it's the US Open, Conservation International. You can see the Animal Planet logo, National Geographic, and I'm sure many other logos that you know. Sagi is also, I think, the most reliable design expert I know. He basically not only asked by me, but also by Bloomberg, by Fast Company, by Business Week, and he's also on the NBC Meet the Press network to answer questions about logo design. And here at CENTRO, we've been very fortunate because we showed an exhibition of the work of Tom, Ivan, and Sagi right after the opening of CENTRO in 2005. And ever since then, the three have come back to give workshops to our students from the visual communication program, from our graduate program in design studies, to the teachers, and also conferences in our auditorium. And it's always been, as you can see, packed and also a wonderful hands-on deep learning experience. So actually we were gonna have Sagi back this semester, but for obvious reasons, this changed. And now we have invited him to this platform, which there's a certain opportunity here because now many, many more people can hear us, can see us, and we can share with a wider audience. And while talking about a wider audience, I hope you don't mind that my first question is somewhat personal. How are you, Sagi? How are you faring? And most important, how does all of this affect your creativity?
Wow, great first question. I'm fine. I think that this whole situation makes me feel grateful for my health. And I think that's the first thing that everybody should really be taking away from this, is that if you're healthy, be grateful. But if you ask about creativity, you know, when I talk to my students and my team as designers, first of all, we are lucky that we can continue to do our work remotely. That's not true about many professions. So that is actually a great aspect here to see. And all the design students and design practitioners that are on today should be grateful for that. You picked the right profession. My creativity is really the only constant in this time. I mean, there's so much uncertainty and everything is different about our life. But I found that my creative juices are still running very strongly, and that's really great. And I feel that's like the only thing that hasn't changed. And I encourage everyone, and the other day with my students, I said, you know, this situation is going to pass. That we know for sure. We don't know exactly how long, but we know it's going to pass. But the work that you can create now in this time will be here forever, in your portfolio, with your clients. If you put something great in place, it will be there forever. So that's more of an incentive, I feel, for us and for our students to create great work at this time.
Thank you, Sagi. I think there's also a message for all of us who are not designers. I think being creative, doing new things like this platform, like VOR OnLive, creating new courses, creating new content, I think something that will outlast this time and stay around is something, you know, that keeps us going. I want to say thank you to the team who created this. It was a lot of work, but actually it was also a lot of fun. And well, the creativity is what maintains you. It stays the same. How about business? Is business the same? Is business changing? How do businesses react to all of this? I mean, you created new logos. Are they still launching? Is new business coming? Is everybody running away? What's the story there?
Yeah, it's great. And, you know, we had no idea what was going to happen. I think just as this kind of time of crisis reveals each person and how they behave, they also reveal each organization, each company, and how they respond. So there were some clients, potential clients, that became very scared and skittish and, oh, let's put it on pause and let's do this. And on the other hand, there were quite a few businesses and companies that are actually responding in a very different way. So I'll just give you some examples. We're working with a very, very large bank, and they are a very progressive company. They always look to the future. Their culture is always thinking 5-10 years ahead. And for them, this project that had just started when this situation began was a great opportunity. And they seized on this opportunity because they are not thinking, you know, on the very close, you know, tomorrow, the next day. They're thinking a long-term view. And as you know, an identity is really something that is all about a long-term view. It's all about building value for decades to come. So they realized that, and they even accelerated this project, really using this time to do this properly and putting in place something that can build recognition over time for them, really investing in their brand. This is an investment. About launching, we just completed a couple of months ago a new identity for a new museum in the US, in Colorado. It's the US Olympic and Paralympic Museum. It's the museum that's going to celebrate Olympic achievement with US teams. The building is an unbelievable building that was designed by Diller Scafidio. And we created an identity for this building, and they're actually going to launch it in the next week or two on purpose. Even though the museum is closed, they cannot open it to the public, even though it's ready. So they're waiting on that, but in order to kind of inspire the community, and this is really a source of national pride because it celebrates the achievement of US Olympic athletes and Paralympic athletes, they will launch the new identity now at this time. So again, people are adjusting, and the more nimble you are, the more successful you will be in seeing this not just as crisis, but also as opportunity. Another type of business that is really thriving in these days is esports.
Esports? What's that?
Esports, we learned, is a huge industry. In fact, there's more money in esports than the music and film industries combined. And esports is basically people sitting and watching gaming, people playing games, video games. So that is something that we got into because we now are working in the service of a major team in esports, creating a logo for them. Just one last example of a business, a big resort out of India. Construction had to stop, but they can work on their identity. So they're, again, using this time as an opportunity. So I would say that, it's all in your mind. How do you think about this time, both from the designer aspect and the client?
On the business, yes. Actually, I think a lot of people who are watching today are also working, and actually some of the questions that people sent me when they knew that I was going to have you on this talk was, everybody now understands that an online presence, a strong online presence, is absolutely essential to whatever is going to come. And, I wanted to ask you, does this sort of have an effect about how you think about successful logo design? And I was thinking that because you're such a wonderful design critic, could you also talk about the logo that maybe one that we all know, that we're all using right now, the Zoom logo, the platforms that have surged, can you talk about that logo, and can you tell us, how in general do we think about a logo and the online presence?
Actually, the Zoom logo is not so hot. Look, we're looking for simplicity in a logo, and it certainly is simple. But the Zoom logo for me represents a trend that I wish that we will get past pretty soon, and that is that it is just almost too simple. It becomes generic. It becomes a big nothing that we don't really remember. We work on a continuum between distinction on the one side and simplicity on the other. How simple can you make something while still keeping it memorable? And on the other hand, how distinctive can you make it without making it too busy? So the magic is in the balance. You have to find the right balance between the two. And because everybody is looking for simplicity, and I think honestly, because a lot of people are afraid to do something distinctive these days in case it's already trademarked and so on, then things have become a little watered down. And there are other examples. Yeah, there are other examples of things that kind of have become simple to a fault. So, Facebook actually used to have a pretty distinctive word mark, pretty distinctive lettering. And a few years ago, they simplified it to just what looks like a typeface, not very memorable at all. Obviously, they don't rely on the logo, right? But it's just an opportunity lost. And other examples here. We still remember logos from different.
Can we see some good ones?
Yeah, that work, that are still simple and still work in every platform, but they are memorable. There's something distinctive about them, something special about them. All the way from FedEx and IBM that are from a very long time ago, all the way to Instagram. Actually was done by Mackie Saturday, who works with us and has a lot of personality. So I would say let's not forget about something special.
Okay, in a more general way, maybe to speak about, what should a good logo do? I mean, you just talked about a very specific aspect, and maybe you can talk about some examples from your studio. What is the idea of a strong logo that works across different platforms, that works in different media? How do you think about that?
So, as I said, there's basically three things that we're looking for in every logo. Appropriate, which means it has to feel right. It has to have the right personality, the right idea. Distinctive and memorable, unusual enough to persist in our mind. So you see it once or twice, you close your eyes, you can recall it. You can describe it. You can draw it for yourself. And simple. So it needs to be uncomplicated in form, so it can work everywhere in every situation. So if you put up those 4 examples again, those are, again, from very different decades, very different times. Chase Bank is from the 60s. NBC
Can we
is
see
from
the examples
80s.
maybe? Can we put them up again? Yes, great.
And the US Open is just a couple years ago. That is, all of them kind of present a simple, memorable silhouette that's also appropriate for the brand. And they work, functionality is key. So they work in every applications where they have to appear. And
yes.
that is the test, right? That is the test. And you see, even National Geographic, even when somebody makes it with a flashlight, it recalls it because it's simple, memorable, and appropriate.
Yes, and we can see the Chase logo on social media, and Chase was done before social media was around. So I guess the message is a little bit, I mean, now we're all worried about social media and online selling and working and everything, but we don't know what the next thing is, and we don't want to change the logo every time something new comes around, right?
Yeah, and I will give credit to Tom Geismar and Ivan Chemaev. When they created this logo in the 60s, there was no computers, no internet, no social media. So the idea of doing something simple and bold and distinctive kind of transcends all media, all platforms, and something is going to come along that we can't anticipate right now.
And actually, looking at the logos here, I remember something that I wanted to ask you like a long time already. It's basically, you see there's the peacock, and you obviously see the feathers. And I mean, I love tennis and try to play a little bit, but I very much identify with the mark of the tennis ball and all this. But then there are completely abstract forms like the yellow rectangle or the chase form, which is a total abstract form. I mean, you can imagine something into it, but it's not obvious. So my question is, when do you choose something that's quite pictorial, or when do you go the other way and go all the way abstract? Is there some way to think about that?
I think it's a great question, and it's a question that we all have to ponder when we solve an identity design problem. And actually, since Tom had done the Chase Bank logo, which is, as you mentioned, completely abstract, this was the first abstract mark for a bank in the United States. They were able to do that because of the exposure, the unbelievable exposure that the bank had at the time, second largest bank in the United States, advertising every day. So they could establish something that's abstract. But Tom says that today, many people try to do that even when they should not be doing that. So how do we decide? Let's just take 2 examples that are very recent. Conservation International on the one hand, that is very abstract, and Animal Planet that we did very recently that is pictorial, as you said. One abstract, one pictorial. Why? Well, Conservation International is a very, very explicit name. We see that, we know what they do. And so we thought that something abstract that has to be cross-culture and all over the world. Obviously, there was a strong idea about the blue planet with a green underline emphasized outline, but it's a very abstract form. But with a distinctive name and explicit name, Conservation International, we thought they could go abstract. For Animal Planet, the reason that we went pictorial is that we wanted to build on their history. So they historically have had this elephant, and we wanted to kind of take it to the future, take it to the next level, make an exuberant elephant that still recalls what they were, but is completely different from a personality standpoint. Doesn't look like natural history, doesn't look stodgy, but it looks young and joyful and exuberant. And that's where we ended up. So I think the answer to your question is every exercise.
Can we go back to the other slide? Sorry. Yes.
Every solution has to consider the audiences, has to consider the problem at hand, and then you make the right decision.
Can I ask you something, a little side question? I mean, I see Conservation International before and after. Was that hard for the client?
Very hard. And, I think that it took about 6 months for them to come around to something that was completely abstract. I mean, you can imagine these are scientists and that are very good at addressing environmental issues, but it's much harder to go from a kind of a painting, something that's understandable, trees, hut, monkey, bird, to something that's completely abstract. But sometimes the harder is the transformation, the bigger the gain. So the payoff is huge because now they've established this 10 years later as a very strong symbol for conservation within their audience the world over. So we really believed in it, and therefore we had put up a case and eventually convinced them.
Talking about scientists and conservation, I'm very glad to see this logo up here because it's also something, that we are all thinking about in this time. And there's a lot of talk about, on the one hand, the environment and how the environment is somehow coming back and taking a break from all the flights and everything. So I think the whole conservation idea is important, but also what you said about the scientists in terms of listening to the scientists. And I think scientists have been talking about the effect on the environment for years. So I think there's an opportunity also to consider that. Another thing that I think we're all thinking about right now is online learning. I mean, many in the audience, I think, have children who do online learning or are doing online learning themselves. Our students at CENTRO, we migrated basically within 4 days to 100% online learning. We created new courses for continuing education, and I'm just basically talking to the students and to the teachers about their experience and finding many new insights that are almost a little bit counterintuitive, about what you think would work and what you don't think. And you, you were teaching at the School of Visual Arts also, and you're doing online learning now. How has that changed? What are your top insights about learning online? What's the difference? Is there a difference? What do you think?
Well, there's major difference, right? I mean, both in our practice and in our class, the energy in the room is very important. And that's one thing I regret, is not being able to be with the students together and with my clients together in the room. That's a major loss that I hope will come back. On the other hand, if you think about, if you break it down, the creative process and the teaching process is really two things. It's the creative development and the critique. Those two things are kind of the core. And in our case, creative development is done by hand. And so what we do with our class is, the students are still sketching by hand. Some of my students flew back to China. Some of my students flew back to Korea. But they all tune in at the time of the class on Eastern time. And sometimes it's the middle of the night over there. And we do the critique of their sketches online. And everybody's listening and everybody's learning from everybody's critique. And everybody's participating. So that process is still ongoing, and it's terrific. And I actually recorded a class for Domestika recently, and that's a pure online course. And I learned a lot from having to do that, because you really need to infuse life into a process when you cannot do it face-to-face in the presence of somebody personally. So all of these are things that we're just now must learn, and we are doing it. And I think that is something that, you know, if you cannot be flexible, if you cannot learn, you're going to die. So you have to keep moving forward and be nimble and allow yourself to evolve and to change.
Exactly. I was thinking that, you know, we're going to open this up to the audience to listen to questions from the audience. And so if anybody has a question, please write it in the chat. And while we're looking at some of the questions, we will also look at the Domestika video. Can we see the Domestika video about the online course for a second? Let's see if we can play that. Perfect.
Hi, my name is Sagi Haviv, and I'm a partner and designer at Geismar Haviv in New York City. Over the years, our company has designed some visual identities you might recognize, like those for National Geographic, NBC, Animal Planet, Mobil Oil, Chase Bank, and the US Open. When people ask me what I do, I tell them that identity design is the search for essence. This means initially listening, observing, learning, meeting, understanding, rephrasing, and even challenging. And only then we start sketching and drawing, which takes place on a continuum between distinction and simplicity. How special can we make a mark while still keeping it simple? How simple can we make it without becoming generic? The beauty is in the balance. Every design is a solution to a problem. Our practice is a response to a client's needs. But the difference between good work and great work is the search for something beyond solving a problem. We're looking for an artistic quality. In this Domestika course, I will guide you through this creative process using basic principles of logo design, and I will share with you experiences we had with some of my studio's most prestigious clients. Through the process of working on a logo and identity for a client, we will explore our own identity as graphic designers. Who do we want to be as practicing professionals? This course will help you elevate your work and your portfolio. As a final project, you will learn to create a logo design for your own client and to build a convincing case. First, we will talk about what it means to be a designer and an expert. We will define the criteria for an effective logo and analyze some of the designs that you submitted to us. We will then put the theory into practice and walk through a real-life logo design project. We will go out into the field to find and meet a client. Next, we will follow the process of interviews, analysis, design strategy, and concept development that we went through with Harvard University Press. Finally, we will demonstrate how the logo comes to life in applications and how to develop a comprehensive presentation in order to build a case for your design and be prepared to deal with a challenging client. At the end of this course, you will have the tools to practice identity design professionally. This course is for any creative who seeks to gain perspective on their career path, maximize their talent, and in the process, learn to create an effective logo that can become the cornerstone of a great portfolio. Let's create something new that over time will have the potential to become iconic.
Okay, Sagi, we have a lot of fabulous questions. And so I'm gonna start right away, which is the first one I saw here, maybe about the museum project, is if you can speak a little bit more about anything you want to share about logos for museums. How do you think about that? You know, a huge audience, diverse audience, and your company has done several. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, just like any other identity project, the most important thing for us is the audiences. Who is the audience? Who are we speaking to? Because that kind of determines the personality and the character and the feeling of the identity. You know, we say we're looking for a logo to be appropriate, distinctive, and simple. Distinctive and simple are things that we can see immediately. But appropriate, that's kind of the mysterious one. How do we determine what's appropriate? So for a museum, what is appropriate for a museum? It is something that has a certain level of sophistication, right? I mean, people come to a museum seeking knowledge, seeking experience, seeking visual excitement. So it is a little bit on the cusp of, it's not entertainment, right? It's very different from an entertainment brand. It's a little bit more scholarly, a bit more sophisticated. So I think that we are thinking about a museum in those terms. And for us, you know, it also has to do with the applications. In which applications does the logo need to flex its muscles? Where, you know,
can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
For example, the Olympics Museum, which you just did, how did you get to what is appropriate? How did you get there?
Sure. We start every project with conversations with the people in charge, and sometimes even with the target audience. So we want to understand what do the people in charge, what is the vision, what is the desired personality, what are the plans for the future, what are similar institutions that may be in their space. All those things work into our decisions then, finding a way to represent them in the most effective way that also distinguishes them from everybody else in the space.
Okay, and there's actually a question from another person in the audience, which says, I mean, it's more about the internal client, and it says, and how can you prevent controversy when a rebrand is made? Or, you know, I mean, big companies, we saw some big companies there, and some of them are rebranding. So, I mean, can you prevent it? Is there controversy by nature? Or how do you go about it? And maybe you can talk about some of the most challenging examples that you faced in terms of rebranding.
Well, first of all, I don't know that controversy is so bad. You know, controversy comes and goes, but I'll just give you a funny example. Well, it's funny now. It wasn't funny then, but for Tecnológico de Monterrey, we did a logo for them. It was perfect for what they needed, but it was a controversy. People have a very hard time with change, and they got a whole blow up from people on Facebook that didn't like it at first. And what happened was, first of all, a year later, everybody already accepted it and liked it because it was their university. But in the midst of those couple of weeks, it became so famous and well known immediately that a process that usually takes years happened very quickly for them. And so they were able to establish this mark very quickly because of controversy. So it doesn't mean that we need to seek controversy, but the idea is that a logo is a long-term investment. It doesn't matter what people think about it the first time they see it. It really doesn't. What matters is how it fares over time, because the idea of a logo is to endure and to build equity and recognition, and it becomes an asset over time. So we really focus on getting it right for them in the long term, and we don't worry so much about the short term. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't think about creative ways to launch a new mark, and that is something that for sure takes place once we arrived at the right solution. But arriving at the right solution is first and foremost. And we don't think about, well, are people going to like it? Are people not going to like it? That doesn't matter at all. We also try to stay away from trends. You know, right now 3D is in. That was very in the 90s and early 2000s, 3D logos. You know, people, when they discovered gradient, they did a lot of gradients. We really try to ignore all this noise and do something that really is outside of what is fashionable, because what is in today will be out tomorrow. Trends pass very quickly, and as I said, we're looking for something that will be timeless and stick around for a long time.
Well, there's a question sort of about, there are two questions that talk about, this trends, timelessness. How does it work? There's one where the person asked, these days people are spending more time on social media scrolling rather than interacting with any of the posts. How can designers create content that attracts the attention of a very distracted audience? And I don't know if there's something to say about that in that context between trends, between content, between a logo, the difference maybe to clarify that. And there was also one about modern and contemporary. Let me have a look. Can you go about the one that I just said about content and everything? And I'm going to look at the other one.
So I think what was the question?
The question is that basically we're all scrolling, we're going through content.
Right.
How can we use content to attract the distracted audience, basically?
Right.
And what does the logo have to do with that?
Well, as I said, we don't worry about attention span, but the logo happens to be a mark that by definition attracts attention. Because if you think about it in a kind of a busy visual environment, you'll notice that the simplest things attract your attention, catch your attention. Your eyes always attracted to the simplest, boldest element. So with that, maybe there's something to learn here. Even when we teach how to design a poster, which you can think about an Instagram post as a poster, basically, we are very disciplined, even with our students, requiring that they kind of distill it to the simplest possible form, because that's what works in tiny size, that's what works from far, and that's also what's going to work in a kind of a quick scroll. You'll see, you will park on the things that are the simplest visual. So my advice would be keep it simple.
Okay, but then there's a question, a follow-up question on exactly that topic. Eric here is talking, okay, how can you prevent a simple logo turn into generic? Where's the border? How can you determine if it's too simple, like how do you I mean, the rectangle, the National Geographic, I mean, can it get simpler, so what is right there? How do you think about the fine line between simple and generic?
Yeah, that's the key to our entire profession. And let's start with the National Geographic that Tom Geismar did. It is the simplest logo on the face of the planet in some way. But what gives it distinction is the color yellow. And you will see that logo, everywhere you see it, will be in yellow. So it's the exact proportions of that rectangle, and it's the color. And that combination is what makes it proprietary and recognizable. So how do we know what is too complicated and what is too... So with the way we create things, and earlier on, you had a slide that showed some of our sketches for Animal Planet. Maybe you can put that back on. When we come up with an idea, we then... So even if we decide that is the idea, we then get into a simplification and reduction mode. And we try to, it's all about reduction. We remove detail. We try to eliminate any decoration, any extraneous element to expose the essence of the form. So we need to know where to stop, right? And we look at many different possibilities about rendering a single idea, the same idea in many, many different ways, to find the perfect spot on that continuum that I described before, between simplicity on the one hand and distinction on the other. And when we find that, and it's usually very, very close to the absolute simplicity, the closer you can get to the absolute simplicity, the stronger mark you will have. But you have to be very careful not to become too generic, like some of the examples we showed before.
Do you see the slide, Sagi?
Yep.
Can you talk about it in that sense? An example?
Well, we decided we wanted an elephant. We decided that we wanted to do something that's evolutionary for Animal Planet, that grows out of their history, that, when you ask people, what's the logo for Animal Planet, most people actually said elephant, still remember that elephant. So we set out on a quest, and this is one page out of hundreds of pages of explorations. How can we capture that elephant and make it very, very, very simple? And ultimately, the idea of a leaping elephant really kind of became something that we got very excited about. And all of us kind of worked very hard to kind of get to that point, that magical balance between something that's very simple and looks really like a gesture, and still kind of memorable. And that blue leaping elephant is what came out.
Okay, fabulous. There's also a question in general, maybe which logos you admire. Are there any logos in Mexico that you can say something about, or generally, what are the logos that you love?
Well, I always admired the McDonald's logo, I have to say. And the reason I admire it is that I don't like it. I don't like it, and I think, we always say, and we tell our clients, it's not about what we like or dislike, it's about what works. And so I enjoy admiring something that I don't like. I mean, it looks like, to me, always looked like two soggy French fries, but it's something that burns into your mind, and you remember it, and it works for them all around the world. And so I admire it. There's one logo in Mexico that I just remember the X, but I think it's Comex.
Yes.
And every time I come to visit, I see it around, and again, it just stays with you. Yes, it stays with you. So I think, on the other hand, there's some logos in Mexico I would change. Like
any examples?
Telmex.
What do you not like about Telmex?
It just needs something new. It didn't age well. It's too busy, and it doesn't look like it's forward looking somehow. It looked like it's stale. And that's the last thing a brand wants. So I think that there are ways to take something like this and bring it forward.
Okay. Here's another question. It's a follow-up question on your studio, which is basically asking. I mean, you have a very collaborative process in your studio. You work as the partners very closely together. And also, with the time, how do you handle your studio? I mean, how do you keep working? How do you do that?
You mean right now?
Yes.
Yeah. So we've been working remotely since early March, and it's an adjustment. It's an adjustment, but I think, as I said earlier, we're all so grateful that we can continue to work, and we treat this as a gift, really a gift, that we can sit in place, we can shelter in place, and still be creative, and still be artistic. There's part of our profession that is art. Yes, it's in the service of a client, but in the Renaissance, Leonardo and Michelangelo, they worked in the service of a patron, and they created great art. And I think that's how we must look at our profession. We're not only looking for a solution to a problem, we're looking for an artistic quality. And that's something that, we can do in our homes without leaving the house. And so when we are, every day we have an all-staff meeting with our team. Everybody comes in from wherever. Also on our team, some people went back home to Korea and other places. So everybody connects over Zoom, and everybody presents their work that they've done since the last meeting, and we discuss it. And honestly, I think that it gives our team an opportunity to present their work, which they oftentimes don't do in normal days. So I hear my staff, my team, talking about their work more, and there's something great about that.
Fabulous. Here's a very practical question, but I think a great one. Do you present options to your clients? And how many? And how do you think about how many options you present, which ones? How do you think about options?
Yeah.
And how do you determine what the right options are, and how does that work?
We always present options. If Ivan was here, he would tell you that he doesn't like to present options. I oftentimes had to hear from Ivan, why do we have to present options? Because we also know which option we like the best. And Ivan was always worried that the client wouldn't pick the option that we like the best. But let's start from why do we present options? We are experts in identity, but our client is the expert in their field. And we must have some humility about there could be an option or there could be a design that we think is great and doesn't work because of reasons that we cannot anticipate, because we don't know everything there is to know. Even though in the beginning we try to really understand everything, we're like a sponge. We try to understand everything about the business and the industry and their work so that we can do something appropriate. So that's why we present options. But we only present good options. And that is something that is very important to us. We will never present something that we cannot live with if it's selected. So we would only present good options. So literally, we tell the client, you can walk in, cover your eyes, point at one, and you can go with it, and it will be successful for you. So the options are all presented in the context of applications. So sometimes these presentations are very long, so we can judge which one functions the best. Functionality is the most important thing. Last thing I'm going to say is that how many options? It's never more than, so we sometimes do two phases. The first is that we present to a smaller circle of people, maybe the marketing team, the communication team, the art director, and there maybe we'll bring additional options, a larger number, maybe 6, maybe 5, maybe 7. And together with them, we will narrow down the options to the executives. The executives will never see more than 2 or 3 options, because this is not their expertise. And oftentimes, if they see too many, they will get flustered, they would get confused, and that's counterproductive. So we will decide on the best options to bring them, and sometimes it's just one. If you can make a strong case for one option, and if you have a leader that understands expertise, then you can just come in with one.
Fabulous. Thank you, Sagi. There was actually a question for CENTRO. So before I ask you the next question, I'm just going to go to this question. People ask us, what's VOR? What does this VOR stand for? And the VOR is actually a term from navigation, from air travel. And it's, it's the radio signals that are sent out to guide the pilots on the right route, to when they connect with all these different cities in the world, the VOR, it's what keeps them on the right route. And we thought we're all looking, to be on the right route. So we're all looking to find the right path in all this uncertainty and complexity. And so we thought this was a great name for us. And I repeat for the people who didn't hear the very beginning that we're doing a series of Facebook Lives, we're doing podcasts and other content, and you can find out about it on our website. And actually today, because it's the World Day of Design, at 6 o'clock Mexican time, there's going to be another great Facebook Live with Odile Leno, who is the co-founder of Wanted Design, an amazing design platform in New York that we, CENTRO, have been participated in with our students for many years. And actually last year we did a workshop with her here at CENTRO. And the second person in the conversation is Cecilia Leon de la Barra, and she is a faculty member of CENTRO. She's a great designer, a great design curator, and both Ceci and Odile are two of my favorite people in the design world. So I think it will be a wonderful conversation. Also, so everybody who's time at 6, please connect to this. And I think this leads us to a wonderful question here. I just, sorry, I have to scroll up. It's basically by Ale, and she says, he or she, I don't know, where and how do you search for inspiration? And what inspires you? How do you think about inspiration? What is curiosity for you? How does that work?
I think there's 2 tracks for that. One track is inspiration in general. As I said, our profession is kind of somewhere between art and business. It's art in the service of business. So going to museums, looking at art keeps you always inspired. Looking at what other designers are doing. They're very good designers around the world. Always seeing, learning, getting inspired by them is very important, kind of as an ongoing thing. But as inspiration for a logo, for an identity, for a solution for a client, the inspiration for me comes from my conversations with the client. So we're sitting there in an interview and we look like we're taking notes, but actually I'm usually sketching things. Others take notes, but there's all kinds of things that are being said that inspire me. It's not a one-to-one. It's not that somebody's going to say something and then I would draw that something. It's just a matter of listening, getting a feel for the culture of the company, for their vision, for their mission. What do they do things, how do they do things differently? What makes them special? And how they should be represented for many years to come. And that's what inspires you. So I know it's a little vague, but I think that listening is very, very important for us in creating our work. When we, in the process of listening, is how we get inspired.
And I mean, on the projects that you're working on now, you're doing the listening over platforms, and how does that change?
It's better because you can just sketch and nobody can see.
Well, that's really great. I'm looking. I think there are quite a few people from branding and advertising and design out there, because there's all sorts of questions around how branding efforts, advertising efforts can support the logo and vice versa.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, it's so important. Look, I mean, a logo is not a brand, and that's something that is very important to understand, and we tell the client that as well. A logo cannot say very much about you. In fact, the less they say, the better. a logo is meant to identify you strongly and clearly. So a logo is only one piece of a communication program. If you think about an ad on a billboard or an ad on Facebook, the logo takes the least number of pixels. Really, the most real estate is taken by the message, is taken by the image, is taken by the visual language. All this is very, very important for the brand. However, when people come to us, they usually have a logo problem. And that problem, if you don't fix it, it's very hard to get everything right, because the logo is that one piece that travels from your ad to your social media, to your app icon, to your business card, to your website, and ties everything together, reminds us about the brand. So your advertising can change from year to year. Your window displays, if you're in fashion, can change from season to season. But the logo is the constant. The logo is the big investment. So advertising, marketing, communication is very, very important. It's key. But the logo is a very different kind of brand element that, if done right, it becomes a vessel that holds all the advertising and marketing and outreach that was done over all the years. It holds it, it contains it, and it reminds us of it.
Thank you, Sagi. I mean, we're running out of time, unfortunately, and I can see that you have to come back to Mexico whenever that's possible, because there are many other questions here that unfortunately we couldn't answer in this short time. However, I'm sure Sagi is going to be back at CENTRO as soon as we can. And there's also many, my WhatsApp is going like this, many questions from students, but the students should be very calm, because if they're in the workshop with Sagi, he's obsessed with all these things and he explained them in much more details. We usually work on industry projects, so you can see them. Thank you for everybody who made this possible, all the team that has been so amazing working on this and getting it going literally in a week. Thank you, Sagi, for being our guinea pig.
Thank you.
For coming here on the first time on Facebook Live. And well, all the very best to everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy. And I hope we'll meet back here at CENTRO very soon. Thank you, Sagi.
Thank you.